With anime composer Yoko Kanno turning 60 today, and after the recent release of Blue Giant, I thought it'd be fun to explore the relationship between jazz and anime with a few people who know more than me.
Listening to this soundtrack on loop, I'm like, wait a second, this is jazz in here, you know? And it's more kind of character motifs that come through.
I think they're just beautiful, like gifts. Apart from the anime itself, that kind of enhances the anime itself and brings to life the character, but also the narrative of the anime.
Every soundtrack, like jazz soundtrack or jazz opening, it's like very sophisticated for the anime, independent of the main character as well.
And I started to realize, wow, it is actually everywhere. I hadn't clicked.
People are like, jazz? Isn't that going to put people off? And I'm like, jazz is used in animation soundtracks all the time, and then people don't believe you until you start naming stuff.
So one of the ways that jazz comes into anime is with cueing a particular historical time period. So we've kind of got the time and place, we've got the aesthetic, and then we've got the kind of the futurist aesthetic in particular, and then of course there are just a very, very few series that are actually more clearly about jazz. One of the big directors from he started out in the 60s, 70s kind of thing. He's still active today. His name is Rintaro. And he has one piece that is completely a jazz score, his Metropolis, a kind of homage to Fritz Lang's. It's set in the 20s and 30s, and it's an homage to those silent detective films.
They add jazz when it's kind of detective things, police things. So it's very nice when you see that.
So it's kind of film noir track.
Yeah. So this is one of the ways that we see jazz coming into anime is through series that are set in the 20s or 30s, whether it's an actual historical piece or whether it's a kind of fantasy historical, and whether it's set in Japan or in the States. It can also cue geography, so things set in the US will get at least a motif coming through. But in some cases, the entire soundtrack as well. And then the second main way that we see, of course, is with Yoko Kanno and more of it jazz as an aesthetic.
I honestly think they use jazz to give you a better understanding or to help you picture the character. Like, for example, Spike, when you see him, you're like, oh, it's a cool guy. He's got his hands in his pockets. He's got his yellow shirt, his suit, yeah, blah, blah. And you put that image in your head, but it's not a complete image. It's part of an image. But then when jazz comes in and he's walking lethargically in like the sunset view and all the lights are flashing, the cars are driving past him and he's just walking with his hands in his pocket, it makes you get a complete image of this character in it. It then makes you understand him more and who he is, and through that you can then understand that cool, Spike is kind of just one of those cool guys. That is how jazz can like enhance everything, and I think that is the purpose of jazz in anime.
When you listen to jazz, you can see how depending on the rhythm, it can be quite smooth, it can be very soft music to relax, to chill, or it can be also very motivated.
Another famous composer, Makoto Yoshimori, and he's done a couple of series that have, quite strong jazz scores. One of them is set in the States, I think in the Prohibition era, Bakano. So that makes sense because it's kind of cueing time and place. But the other one is not. It's contemporary Tokyo, and it's called Durarara, a series with a real frenetic energy to it. But it's also much like Blue Giant and that theme of jazz musicians are there, they treat each other as stepping stones. That's the point. It's not the point to form a band that lasts for 50 years. And in a way, that series, it has an ensemble cast, and all of their stories are weaving in and out, but they're their own, there's not a hierarchy in that sense, so I think the jazz score there is a really powerful metaphor for the style of writing and the storytelling.
You can see how it's about competence, like being the best, being in the best place. I think everyone in the movie, they push to their limits at some point. I can see music in the characters like that. Sometimes we are just, oh, this is enough, but actually it's not. I can see how through music they are growing. Not only the guy from the drum, obviously that he's the one that grew the more.
A third time period, really, where we see jazz music, which is future, the futuristic setting. And that's really down to Yoko Kanno and Watanabe and Cowboy Bebop, that they defined for Japanese anime culture anyways, what the sound of the future. And the sound of the future is jazz infused. We get that especially like Yuki Kajiura, who's like a contemporary of Yoko Kanno. And she's done, oh my goodness, I think about 60 different anime series. And so quite a number of hers will have jazz motifs. So there we've just got Kanno and Watanabe's subsequent series after Cowboy Bebop, which is Kids on the Slope. And that's set in the 60s, and this group of high schoolers who basically kind of discover jazz and the way that the jazz music weaves through their very melodramatic love triangles and quadrangles and all of that sort of thing. Just recently, there's been this absolute mega hit in Japan and around the world called Spy Family. So it's a Cold War kind of spy family comedy. And it has again, quite a strong jazz influence there, but because it's all these crazy madcap chase sequences and ridiculous fight sequences and just craziness like that. So
That sounds great.
And Kanno actually mixed the theme song for the second season. So I think we're prepping for another generation basically to discover jazz through anime.
You can just listen one or two soundtracks during a movie and then you just love it. It's like, wow, yeah, I have to listen to this again. And then, yeah, because of that, then it came more and more and more. And that's how, at the end, you just finish like, and loving jazz. But in my case, it really influenced me.
There was a period, where I only listened to anime soundtracks for like 6 months. No kidding. Just soundtracks, because they had so much emotion in them.
Whenever I listen to something good, I'm like, I'm gonna try to learn that on the bass.
If jazz can be executed in the right way, it can take you on a journey. Like it's like you imagine like a whole utopia. That's how jazz makes you feel. It makes you feel relaxed and cool and smooth. It kind of makes you forget about the worries of the world.
Every time that they just play jazz or the soundtracks that on the background you can hear, I really enjoy it. It really changed everything in the singing, the part, in the anime in general.
We've looked at the twists and turns of the world of jazz in anime. But what if I told you that jazz and animation extend to the UK too? Jazz Cow is a comedy series I'm working on about a cow who leads a resistance movement. Check out jazzcow.co.uk. And don't miss out on the chance of being part of the story and signing up and supporting us on Kickstarter on May the 1st.
One little fun fact. Miyazaki's first, his feature film debut as a director was part of the Lupin the Third sort of story arc adaptation from the manga. I think it was part 2, and it's the film The Castle of Cagliostro, and that has a jazz soundtrack as well.
It's like, okay, this is very nice music.